watching this from Florida right now, here's hoping your pantry and gas tank are good to go. Or maybe you're on the road already, with hundreds of thousands of people now forced to leave because of Hurricane Ian aiming right at the Tampa coast. It's going to make landfall in Cuba any minute now. We are live in Havana and in Florida, where people are getting ready, or not. Plus, NASA's going all Armageddon on an asteroid tonight to test out new technology that could someday push the big one out of Earth's way. We've got more on tonight's mission, which we're told by reliable sources does not involve Bruce Willis. And new reports that the White House and TikTok may have come to a deal over how that app stores data. So is it going to change anything for users other than the fine print? And the exclusive details we're getting from the DEA tonight on so-called rainbow fentanyl, what parents and really everybody should know. And in tonight's backstory, we go behind the scenes on how our team reported on the way former President Trump is embracing QAnon, that dangerous and sometimes deadly conspiracy theory. That's later on in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, and at some point in the next couple hours, Hurricane Ian will hit Cuba as Florida braces for what could be its first major storm in 4 years. All of it as, by the way, we're not even done cleaning up from the last hurricane. So you're seeing some of the track there. We're going to talk more about that, but let's take you first to Cuba. This is them. They're locking down gas pumps there, okay, because 190,000 people are very much in the path of what could be 14-foot storm surges. Then there's what's happening in the U.S. The Tampa area is expected to get the worst of it. You see this, the sandbag preps, people filling them up, tossing them in trucks. They've started. The airport in St. Petersburg shuts down tomorrow. Airlines are starting to give out travel waivers. Ian could be the first storm to directly hit the Tampa area in more than 100 years. So now you have a few counties putting in place evacuation orders, like Hillsborough. Do you see the red zone here? The 200,000 people who live there are being told, not asked, they're being told to get out now, with Governor Ron DeSantis saying in the clearest way possible that this storm is going to affect everyone.
Even if the storm, the eye of the storm doesn't hit your region, you're going to have really significant winds. It's going to knock over trees. It's going to cause interruptions. And so that's just the name of the game.
The White House telling our team that FEMA's administrator is in close touch with the governor, sending staff and supplies. All of it as Canada is dealing with what's left of a different hurricane, Fiona. Do you see this? Look at your screen. That is a whole house. That is a full house getting swept away, okay? This is a deadly storm here. One woman was killed on Prince Edward Island. Officials say it might be months before infrastructure is back up and running. And just looking at that, you can see why. In Puerto Rico, about 40% of people don't have power. 20%, 1 in 5, don't have water now a week later after Fiona, which killed at least 16 people there. We're going to get the forecast from Bill Cairns in just a minute, but I want to start with Ellison Barber, who is live for us in Tampa. So, Ellison, tell us a little bit about what you've seen. I imagine that people are getting ready, filling gas tanks, getting ready to lose power, you would think.
Yeah, people are getting ready, and some people we spoke to this morning said they really hadn't done a whole lot of preparation until this morning. Then they started to see the forecast, started to realize that Tampa really is in a difficult position and took more steps to get prepared. This right here is probably all that's left in this Home Depot as it relates to hurricane prep. Lots of batteries that they've moved around and just really a handful in the scheme of things of flashlights. Earlier this morning when we got here at about 6 a.m., and we have a GoPro video we can show you of this, there was just a line of red gas canisters, close to 100 generators, and cases of water. Just hour after hour, people kept coming in, taking them, getting them, and all of them are gone. I mean, this is a storm that people in Florida, you know, they are watching closely, but they're also Floridians, right? They're used to weather, they're used to hurricanes. So kind of the general sense I get from people here is that they are not panicking, they're calm, but they're also trying as best they can to be prepared, particularly as they're seeing these more ominous, if you will, forecasts coming in for this area in particular. Hallie?
Ellison, I have a question. You know, I wonder, and you know, I have family in Tampa, and I wonder about this idea. A storm hasn't hit directly in that area in a very long time. Are people complacent? Like, is there a sense of, like, we're Floridians. We've lived through this stuff. We know how to handle hurricanes. Or do you think there is a sense of urgency here?
I think there is a pretty even split of the urgency and the, hey, we're Floridians. This happens all the time, and we're going to see what happens. We'll play it by ear, if you will. But let me let you listen to some Floridians from Tampa who we spoke to at this store earlier today. Are you planning to stay ride it out, or would you evacuate? What would change for you?
I think because of where my house is located, I'll ride it out.
We're going to be just fine. Whether it hits us or goes south or north, we're going to be fine.
Okay. So there is a significant evacuation order, a mandatory evacuation order, as you mentioned, for Hillsborough County. There are about 200,000 people living in what's considered Zone A, and they've been told they need to evacuate. Zone B, which is kind of right next to it, that county is under a voluntary evacuation advisory. But county officials are hoping that people really do heed the warnings because they are very concerned about what that storm surge will look like for Tampa area. Hallie?
Ellison Barber, live for us there in Florida. Ellison, thank you. So that is where Ian is headed. But what about where it's going to hit first? Guad Venegas is there in Havana. And Guad, the area that's going to get the worst of Ian on Cuba doesn't have the same kind of resources that you and people there in Havana have, right?
Correct, Hallie. So we expect the hurricane to make landfall west of Havana. This is where they're going to get it the worst, right? So the government has said that there's an alert for 7 different provinces, and that does include Havana. I spoke with someone at the Institute of Meteorology. They're the official source of information here in Cuba, who told me they do expect conditions here in the capital to be that of a tropical storm. And of course, being the capital, there's more resources. Now, if we go further west, the city, the largest city in that area where the hurricane is expected to hit the hardest, is Pinar del Rio. This is a city of more than 140,000. The province has more than 500,000 people. This is where they are evacuating 50,000 individuals, 50,000 residents that are very close to the ocean. And of course, it's a rural part of Cuba. They don't have as many resources. The government has allowed more rations to be sold at some of their stores for individuals to go prepare as best as they can. When you look at Cuba, people here can't go to a store like we do in the United States, right, and buy all the water and food that you can afford. People here have to figure out ways to get enough food to get through the next 1 or 2 days when they expect a lot of these small stores to be closed. Others have improvised markets where they sell vegetables and other things to neighbors. So they're just preparing as best as they can, while the military and the government is making other preparations. They do expect some damages also to the power lines here. So the power would be is expected to be shut down later today, Hallie.
Guad Venegas live for us there in Havana. Guad, thank you for being there. Please be safe tonight. We'll be checking back in with you tomorrow, of course. I want to get to Bill Cairns right now. And the weird thing about this particular storm, Bill, and I think it speaks to what Ellison and I were talking about, the complacency factor. You talk about the spaghetti models. They're everywhere. I mean, it looks like you really did throw them at the wall, right? There's a bunch of different paths here. What do we know right now, and what can we say with confidence it'll do?
We're starting to narrow in. We're eliminating some areas. I mean, we may have hurricane wind gusts arriving in Florida in 48 hours from right now. So that's not that far away. So, yeah. And we got the new advisory in, and it's shifted once again slightly towards Tampa. And the reason everyone's making a big deal about Tampa, A, 3 million people live in that area. But the second reason is it's been 100 years. So they've been hit by a hurricane, not even a major hurricane, just a hurricane. So they've been unusually lucky. I mean, other areas of Florida, as you've known in the last decade and even 2 decades, have gotten nailed by many a storm. So where will this one go? First thing. Hurricane Center just upgraded this to a Category 2 hurricane. Not a surprise. We expect this to jump up to a 3 tonight, possibly a hurricane Category 4. They call that a major hurricane as we go throughout tomorrow. Actually, it's a major once it gets to 3, and then 4 is kind of the middle of the major, and then 5 is the rarity that you never want to see like they had in areas of the Panhandle in Florida with Michael. So where are we taking this? Here's the brand new track from the Hurricane Center. They still have it being a Category 4, exiting Cuba early tomorrow and leaving that area. Key West, you're going to wake up tomorrow to gusty winds. You're going to feel tropical storm gusts. And then notice this. Look how close this is. Category 4 right off the coast of Fort Myers to Sarasota, Bradenton, Venice, up towards the Tampa area. And then the storm slows down. So we got a major hurricane that will start weakening as it approaches land. So we're going to get storm surge for a long period of time, incredible amounts of rain, and the winds, even though they're going to slowly be weakening, they're still going to be gusting for a long period of time. I mean, we're going from Wednesday 2 p.m. to Friday 2 p.m. only this far through Florida. So this is going to be a long haul. It's going to be, Wednesday's the damage, Wednesday night, Thursday morning, and then all day Thursday, we're still going to have tropical storm gusts. You were mentioning those spaghetti lines. They're getting a little bit better. Notice the split, though. We only have about 2 or 3, including our American model and the Euro model, which are some of the more reliable ones, right over Tampa. But we have a couple that take a right turn all the way down here towards Fort Myers. Then a couple are still to the left. So it's not, etched in stone that we know exactly where this is going. But our cone of uncertainty, this white thing is starting to shrink. It no longer includes Panama City. Your forecast has been improving. But the forecast from Tampa to Sarasota to Bradenton to Venice, all the way down here to Fort Myers, that's the area that the forecast has been getting worse, Hallie, over the last couple of days. A storm surge, rain. We could have 20 inches of rain with this storm.
It's bananas, Bill. I'm intimately familiar with Pasco County, and I know what that area's been dealing with. So, Bill, I hope you have your cot there.
Yes.
Set up 30 Rocks. I'm sure we'll be talking. Thank you, friend. Appreciate it. We got some breaking news to get to out of the markets now, with the Dow officially closing in a bear market. It is happening, down more than 300 points since last week, with the S&P and the NASDAQ both falling today also. It's happening at the same time as another key economic indicator, the British pound, hitting an all-time low today against the dollar. 1 pound equaling about $1.03. It's now back up to like $1.07. If you've ever wanted to visit the UK, now is not a terrible time considering the exchange rate. And if you're thinking, hey, a strong dollar, cool, I can get behind a strong dollar. Well, economists aren't so sure. One headline in the New York Times framing this as being good for the U.S. but bad for the rest of the world. And experts point out that in the past, dollar strength like what we're seeing now has led sometimes to some kind of financial or economic crisis. I want to bring in now our NBC business and tech correspondent, Brian Chung. So, Brian, the Dow now officially in a bear market. We had talked last week it was maybe flirting with the bear market. They have now sealed the deal. Does that actually mean anything functionally for human beings who are not day-to-day stock traders?
Well, functionally, it means don't look at your 401k for right now. But when you take a look at the bear market that we entered officially today as of the market close, that is because the Dow fell by over 1% today. Essentially what that means is that from the peak of the Dow earlier this year, it's been a 20% fall. The S&P 500 had already reached that watermark in July. Now, what we're talking about here is a stock market that's obviously been ugly in 2022. All this built around the fears that we're seeing from a Federal Reserve that could be raising interest rates into a recession, the cost of lowering high inflation in this country, compounding all of that with the developments we've seen overseas, as you mentioned, with the British pound falling as much as 4.4% today. That might be good for American travelers, but not good for the international picture, because a strong dollar has, in some cases in the past, led to financial crises in other countries.
What does it mean for, like, exports and such? How seriously should we be taking this news about the pound and the dollar if we're not planning to travel to the UK anytime soon?
Well, if you're talking about from the American viewpoint, that would make American exports certainly more expensive for other buying countries. Now, the overall concern, though, isn't necessarily the flow of goods and trade. What the real concern is going to be is whether or not other countries that have large amounts of dollar reserves, without getting too much into the weeds, might have to defend their currencies. We saw the Japanese government, for example, last week after the Federal Reserve's rate hike on Wednesday, move to try to support their currency. And if you rewind to 1997, the Thai baht had a big issue because of a strong dollar, something we certainly don't want to get to right now. Argentina, Egypt, Kenya, indebted countries to watch, Hallie.
Brian Chung, thank you for that breakdown. Appreciate it. Just a couple of hours from now, NASA is going to crash a rocket on purpose. They will crash it on purpose into an asteroid, a space rock that's just up there, minding its own business, 7 million miles from Earth. So why is NASA doing this? The agency wants to test technology that someday could save the planet. Scientists are hoping to prove that hitting an asteroid coming towards us with a rocket could nudge it a little bit into a different path so that it doesn't slam into Earth. Tom Costello is with us following this drama. Tom, to be clear, this asteroid they're going to hit isn't actually barreling towards Earth. That's not happening. There's no threat. This is truly just a test. It's just an experiment. Tell us more about this mission.
Can we underscore that yet again? This asteroid is not a threat.
Bruce Willis is fine.
It's too far away. This asteroid's 7 million miles away. So what happened is last November, NASA launched this rocket, this spacecraft atop a SpaceX rocket, to 7 million mile destination. They now have rendezvoused with this asteroid. It's called Dimorphos, a nice little Greek name. The bottom line is it is pardon me?
It's intense.
It's very intense. I know all of the NASA names have Greek names, it seems, or an acronym. It's a tiny moonlet, a small moon around a bigger asteroid. What are they going to do? They're going to slam into it, and they don't know what's going to happen because they don't know what this asteroid's made of. Is it just going to be a thud and nothing happens, or is it going to actually cause kind of dirt and dust to fly up out of it? Regardless, their goal here is to literally push it, to give it a nudge, because if they can do that, if they can nudge it just a little bit, then maybe they can do that when we truly are looking at a planet-killer asteroid coming our way. There's nothing on the horizon yet, but that's what they want to have, a planetary defense system.
This is going to happen just after 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific is when this is going to go down. I heard one expert describe it to you as something like a golf cart hitting the Great Pyramids, right? Like this, the scale of this is very interesting. And if it goes well, does that mean we can all breathe a sigh of relief? Like we're protected in case an asteroid does ever someday start barreling towards Earth?
If it happens and we can breathe easier, we won't know that right away. We'll know if it hits tonight. Okay. We'll probably know that in real time. We may not get the data on whether the orbit or the trajectory of that little asteroid, whether that's moved. We won't know that right away. They got to train their telescopes on it, do all the math. Okay. But if it has, then maybe we have a defense if we see an asteroid coming and we can launch one of these in time. But remember what happened in 2013, Hallie Jackson, because I know you remember. Remember that big asteroid that blew up over Russia? It literally caused 1,500 people to be injured. It leveled something like 7,000 buildings, and they didn't see it coming. Why? Because it was coming from the direction of the sun, and the telescopes can't look into the sun, right? That blinds them. So we have a blind spot right now as we look for potentially Earth-killing asteroids. Let's hope that Bruce Willis remains on standby. Seriously. Just in case.
Tom Costello, you're going to have a big night ahead of you. Thank you, friend.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Appreciate it. We'll look for the updates. Thanks. All right. We're going to bring it to you here live, by the way. You'll see Tom for that. Other breaking news here tonight. Within just the last few hours, we saw Edward Snowden, the former U.S. intelligence contractor who is still wanted in the U.S. for espionage. Well, he became a Russian citizen, with Russian President Vladimir Putin signing this decree. Snowden's been living in Russia, you might remember, since he leaked classified documents on the government's mass surveillance programs in 2013. He got permanent Russian residency in 2020 and said he and his wife wanted to get this dual U.S.-Russian citizenship. You see here why. He says because he has no desire to be separated from his son. So in the era of pandemics and closed borders, they wanted that citizenship. The State Department just this afternoon saying its position on Snowden has not changed. Listen.
Mr. Snowden should return to the United States, where he should face justice as any other American citizen would as a result of his Russian citizenship. Apparently now he may well be conscripted to fight in Russia's war in Ukraine.
Priscilla Thompson is joining us now live from London. Priscilla, we have heard something different from Snowden, whose attorney has spoken and reportedly has said Snowden's not actually going to get called up to fight in Russia's war in Ukraine, that he will not be mobilized in that instance. But this issue of citizenship is still really significant for Snowden.
Right. And as it relates to the call of troops, it's important to remember that when Vladimir Putin announced that, he said that it would be limited to those with military experience. And so what we're hearing from Snowden's attorney today through reports from Russian state media is that he's saying Snowden doesn't have that Russian military experience. Therefore, he wouldn't be called up and included in this conscription. But the other important thing to remember here is that this is a partial mobilization, and it may not be the last one. So it is very possible that there could be more mobilizations, and that prerequisite of military experience may not be required. So I'm not sure that this means that Snowden is entirely in the clear as it relates to that just yet, Hallie.
He's one. Listen, I feel like so many people know Edward Snowden's name. He has been wanted by the U.S. for years. They've wanted him to stand trial for espionage. This is coming at this very tense moment, obviously, between the U.S. and Russia, obviously because of the war in Ukraine here. There is a lot of sort of geopolitical implications to Vladimir Putin taking pen to paper and signing that citizenship decree.
Right. It's certainly significant to a certain extent, particularly particularly in that there's not much that the U.S. Can do about that. And we heard the State Department spokesperson saying as much when he says that Snowden should return to the U.S., but not that the government can compel him to return to the U.S. But the other important piece of context here is that Snowden's name was one of more than 70 that were listed on that decree. So this doesn't appear to be anything that was specifically targeted towards Snowden or about Snowden and the U.S. But even so, it does come at this time as relations between Russia and the U.S. are steadily deteriorating as this war in Ukraine continues. Hallie?
In 2017, Putin was in a documentary and was asked about Snowden. And I think it was Oliver Stone, correct me if I'm wrong, who said something like, don't you think he's a traitor for what he did? Let me see if we have a little bit of back and forth that I want to play of that, Putin's response on Snowden.
Сноуден не предатель. Он не предал интересы своей страны и не передал другой стране ни одной информации, которая бы наносила ущерб его народу. Все, что он делает публично.
If you couldn't read the subtitles, if you're watching on your phone or something, it said Snowden is not a traitor. That's what Putin said at the time. Do we know anything else about the relationship between the Russian president and Edward Snowden?
Yeah, the Russian government certainly appears to be friendly towards Snowden's cause and his plight. But Snowden, for his part, has said that he is not going to renounce his U.S. citizenship. He has said that the reason he requested this dual citizenship is because he wanted to be able to travel more freely and cross borders with his wife and his young son, who was born in Russia. He wanted to share a citizenship with his son, who was born there. And he has said that they plan to raise his son with American values. But what is also certainly known to Snowden as he navigates this is that the U.S. is still very much looking for him. They have not giving up on seeking to bring him to account for these charges of espionage. And so he will have to be careful about where he travels and what borders he crosses, knowing that there is the possibility of extradition and that the U.S. is not letting this go. Hallie?
Priscilla Thompson, thank you so much. We've got to get to a news story just developing that you will see only here on NBC News. Because in just the last hour or so, our team has scooped that a member of the far-right Oath Keepers group, who's facing charges for her role on January 6th, was texting with Rudy Giuliani's son to talk about all these conspiracy theories on 2020. Person's name is Kelly Sorrell, who apparently talked with Andrew Giuliani in November 2020 and then a Trump White House aide. She also apparently tried to text a White House number, according to a new book by somebody else who's in the spotlight today, and that's former Republican Congressman Denver Riggleman, who also happens to be a former January 6th committee staffer. Ryan Riley is the reporter behind that exclusive. He's joining us now. What should we know, Ryan?
So, Kelly Sorrell has recently been charged in connection with January 6th. And she's, basically she took over the Oath Keepers actually after Stuart Rhodes was arrested. And she testified before the committee. And she had also been a member of Lawyers for Trump, which was a sort of volunteer organization of people going around the country trying to, bring up these election challenges following the 2020 election. And it was in that capacity that she had these contacts with Andrew Giuliani. But what's critical about this was she was also this member of the Oath Keepers. So a few weeks before January 6th, when the Oath Keepers were trying to get this message to Donald Trump, they wrote an open letter saying, hey, we're going to have a bunch of guns stored outside of D.C. just in case you need us. That was something that was basically trying to get through to the White House. And all of this comes just as the jury selection is set to begin tomorrow in the Oath Keepers trial. And we should learn a lot more about those potential White House connections there, Haley.
What's interesting about Riggleman here, Ryan, is he's been sort of dribbling and drabbling out little pieces of information ahead of his book being published tomorrow, I think it is. He went on 60 Minutes and talked about what he described as an aha moment, a call that he had known about or had heard about between a White House, somebody at the White House, and somebody on the day of the attack who was at the riot, one of the rioters, as this was going down. The January 6th committee has tried to distance itself from Riggleman, essentially saying he hasn't been on staff for a long time. I'm paraphrasing here. But I thought it was interesting that he, in talking with you and your team, was explaining his rationale for why he was divulging some of this previously unknown info in this book.
That's right. And essentially what the committee is saying is that he only knows a picture of this. So he has all of these leads, which then you sort of have to chase down. So I think that, it certainly sheds some light and looks at some issues that we should dig further in on. But, the committee wants to be sort of the final word here and be able to definitively say what happened when it goes forward with its findings in this upcoming hearing and with, of course, its final report, which we should get by the end of the year.
Ryan Riley, thank you. The Biden administration and TikTok have started hammering out a deal to try and address some national security concerns to keep the platform up and running in the United States, according to the New York Times. So if you use TikTok, or maybe you know people who use TikTok, you're going to want to listen to this. People with knowledge of the discussion said TikTok would make some changes in a few ways. First, all data would only be stored on U.S. servers. Remember, TikTok is owned by a Chinese company, which is why there had been some concerns from lawmakers about national security issues. Second, an American tech company would monitor the algorithm for TikTok. And then third, there would be a new board of security experts that would oversee security in this country and then report back to the administration. These negotiations have been happening for years, again, because of ByteDance, TikTok's parent company, with lawmakers, some of them raising red flags about whether TikTok can really protect your data from China. The White House declined to comment on the report. The Treasury Department said it doesn't comment on transactions that it may or may not be reviewing. We've reached out to TikTok. We haven't heard back. TikTok has said that it previously that it stores user data not in China and has defended its app. Steve Kovac is joining us now. First of all, Steve, is this deal actually going to get done? Because, again, this is years in the making. It's something we've been talking about for a long time. Is it going to happen or no?
Hallie, I'm not going to predict if it's going to happen or not, but I can tell you it appears that the Biden administration is trying to placate all sides here to get something through. So,
fair, Steve. So they're trying to land the plane. No crystal ball, but it looks like they're trying to land the plane on this.
Yeah, and what are those two sides? The one side is ByteDance, that Chinese company you talked about. They want to keep their stake. TikTok is going to go public one day and make a ton of money for its stakeholders, and ByteDance, the Chinese company, wants to stay involved in that, but it realizes, look, if it's going to continue to operate in the United States, it's going to have completely hands-off the data. It just came out earlier this year that they actually still have access to the U.S. data, despite a lot of the messaging from the company that they don't. And of course, if the Chinese government asks for that, that's a problem. So what they're trying to do here is work out a deal with a tech company here in the U.S. It sounds like it's going to be Oracle. Oracle's not responding to me when I ask them about it, to host all the stuff in the cloud here in the United States so that data is protected. There's no way anyone in China, let alone the Chinese government, can get a hold of it. At the same time, allow ByteDance to keep their ownership stake and effectively make money off these transactions coming up.
So a micro and a macro question. Micro, if we use TikTok, are we going to notice a difference? And macro, how does this fit into the bigger picture of this sort of tension internationally between China and the U.S.?
Yeah, so let's talk about the micro first, Hallie. On the micro side, you probably won't notice anything different as a TikTok user. Right now, when you agree to stuff on TikTok or any social media app, they can use your data for advertising and things like that. But what is going to be different is that data hopefully won't be viewable by the Chinese government or anyone at ByteDance, the Chinese-owned company. On the macro level, yes, this is a big issue that's talked a lot about in the tech industry, is if we create what's called a splinter internet, meaning there's a Chinese version of the internet and there's a United States version of the internet and and so on and so forth, based on the different rules of each of these countries have and these policies. So that could be dangerous because it creates a less open web. It makes it harder for people to communicate. I mean, we're seeing this in Iran, for example, when they shut down the internet. It's a bad thing for just people communicating in general. So that's the danger here, is if they go too far with it.
Steve Kovac, great to see you over at CNBC.
Thanks,
thank you. Coming up, Italy on track to have its first far-right leader since World War II. What we know about Georgio Maloney and our 5 things. Plus, maybe more trouble for Brett Favre. What we're finding out from new court documents on that whole Mississippi welfare scandal. Wait till you see some of these texts. That's next. The new warning from Iran to the West as protests after the death of a young woman intensify now across the country and more pop up around the world. We're going to take you live to Tehran with one of the few Western journalists who's in that country later on this hour. But first, new texts between former NFL quarterback Brett Favre and former Mississippi Governor Phil Bryant show just how much Favre pushed Bryant for money for a new stadium at the University of Southern Mississippi. Okay. But apparently that was even after Favre was told that using state money, welfare money for that kind of project could be against the law. He'd already gotten millions of dollars for a separate volleyball arena, and now new court filings show Favre texting Governor Bryant for money, to which Bryant says any improper use could result in violation of federal law. Favre then says they could even name the stadium after the governor, that we are not taking no for an answer. To which Bryant then says in part, I'm too old for federal prison. Smiley face emoji, sunglass emoji. It's coming as Favre's Sirius show is now on hold, SiriusXM. ESPN Milwaukee also temporarily suspending his appearances. He's being sued now by the state for allegedly using millions of dollars in this welfare money to pay for personal projects. Now, Favre has said he didn't know the money he got came from welfare funds. I want to bring in Ken Delaney. And so this is, if I'm reading between the lines, this kind of feels like Bryant throwing Favre under the bus.
You're absolutely right. So Bryant...
Well, you told me that before during the commercial break, so I felt pretty confident about suggesting that.
You're really letting people under the hood. But no, so Phil Bryant, the former governor, was deeply involved in steering this money. Previous text messages have shown that, and a lot of people believe that he committed wrongdoing here. So he comes out with this filing saying, wait a second, I tried to blow the whistle on this, and Favre kept pushing me, And that's the thing that everyone agrees on. Whether Bryant did anything wrong or not, Favre relentlessly lobbied the governor and state officials to get money for this volleyball facility where his daughter was playing the sport. Brett Favre, who was paid $140 million in his NFL career, not including all the endorsement money he got, was really putting the pressure on these state officials, and he knew that the money was coming from the state welfare agency. Now, his lawyer says...
In the nation's poorest state, by the way.
Yes.
Right?
Where it's really hard to get welfare, to qualify for welfare. Now, his lawyer says he didn't know it was federal welfare money specifically, which, by the way, the state auditor has now said this was all illegal. People have pleaded guilty to crimes over this. Wow. And it wasn't just this project. There were tens of millions of dollars misdirected from the state welfare program. But a lot of focus on this Brett Favre stuff because Favre was made so much money in his career and is such a celebrated figure.
And it's a non-football related huge scandal. I mean, that's what it is, right? I mean, it's relentlessly being covered in Mississippi and around the country here. We talked about some of the brands kind of distancing themselves from Favre. What does it mean for his legacy? I know you're not a football analyst, but help us put this into perspective here.
But I am a football fan, and like many fans, I loved watching Brett Favre play, and I think it just hurts a lot of fans to see this person who they, lionized over the years.
He didn't play the villain role in the NFL. Do you know what I mean? He wasn't a villain the way that, I can't think of a good example, but the way that some players kind of relish the role of being the villain. That wasn't him.
He played the game with exuberance and with honor, and he put himself out there. And to see him sort of scrounging for these state grants for this facility that benefited his daughter, it just really makes you wonder what was going on there. And in part, he had guaranteed the money himself. He says this in the text. So he's saying, I've pledged almost $2 million, and I'd really like the state to cover that part for me. So whatever is going on there, who knows?
Ken Delaney, and thank you for being on top of that. We'll look for more of your reporting tonight on Nightly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, far-right nationalist Georgio Maloney is set to become Italy's first female prime minister. She's expected to form the country's most right-wing government since World War II. Political rivals and some experts have accused Maloney of spreading white supremacist ideas. There wasn't much turnout in this election. It was actually at a historic low. Number 2, the Biden administration is announcing new rules requiring airlines and online travel agencies to be way more transparent about ticket prices before you actually click purchase. That means they have to be clear about fees for stuff like seats, for checked baggage. You know how this works. When you go to buy your ticket, it's X amount and then all the fees add up. One group that represents big carriers says airlines are already doing this, that they're already being transparent. Number 3, have you seen Don't Worry, Darling yet? We've been talking about it a lot because there's been some off-screen drama surrounding the production. It is finally out, and I guess all that buzz didn't hurt because it came out at number 1 in the box office, pulling in something like $19 million in sales across North America, more than $10 million internationally. Number 4, it is never too late to celebrate, as the Atlanta Braves found out firsthand today, visiting the White House to celebrate their World Series win from last year. President Biden welcomed the team. They gave him his own jersey, although the president also shouted out his wife's affection for the Philadelphia Phillies. The Braves defeated the Houston Astros for their first World Series win since 1995. Number 5, the National Football League looking more like the National Fenty League. Am I right? That's because Riri's going to be headlining the Super Bowl. Halftime show in Glendale. Rihanna posted this photo of her holding an NFL football, keeping the caption real simple with just a period. It's the first halftime show with Apple Music as the primary sponsor instead of Pepsi. All right, I'm gonna watch. When we come back, check it out. This video going viral online, allegedly showing dozens of teens just ransacking a Wawa. We've got the latest on that in the local. Stay with us. Today, Iran is accusing the U.S. of trying to destabilize its country, basically saying that U.S. support of protests triggered by the death of a young woman who died in police custody has been part of the issue, with the foreign minister saying that the political leaders of America and Europe, their media, exploited what they describe as a tragic incident under investigation. State TV says at least 41 people have now been killed. But look at these images, right? You are still seeing these demonstrations going on and even spreading. It's not just in Iran anymore. L.A., Berlin, Toronto. British police say 12 people have been arrested after fighting started at the Iranian embassy in London. Protests started when Mahsa Amini was arrested for allegedly breaking headscarf rules. Officials say she died of a heart attack, but her family said she had no pre-existing conditions. NBC's Ali Arouzi is one of the few Western journalists who is live on the ground in Tehran for us. He is joining us now. We're glad you're there. And Ali, you know, these women are getting a lot of support from around the world because these protests are mostly led by women, but that is leading to this new warning against the West from Iran.
That's right, Hallie. They are truly spooked by this movement, and they're blaming everybody except the situation they've created in this country over the last 43 years. Look, Hallie, the reality is that this has been a burning issue for women since 1979 in this country. They have opposed the hijab. They've gone out and they've made campaigns. They've tried to change the law, but it's never come to their favor. Never, not once. The morality police have always come out. They've come down hard on women. I mean, even, you know, teenage girls in this country, once you reach the age of puberty, you're expected to wear a headscarf. So everybody was fair game for the morality police from 12 or 13 years old. And this all came to a head 10 days ago after Mahsa Amini was killed. That video went viral. Several weeks before she was killed, Hallie, as well, there was an activist in Iran who had taken off her headscarf. She was arrested by the police. She was then taken on TV to withdraw her activities and say, no, she supports wearing the headscarf. She had a big bruise around her eye. That also touched a raw nerve amongst people here. And now we're in this situation, and it's predictably unpredictable, Hallie. I mean, change has come here. It's not, the Islamic Republic are not going to be able to put the issue of the hijab back in the box. But where it goes from here is completely uncertain. There is a big divide between the country's rulers and about 70–80% of this population who are very youthful, very westward-looking, and especially the women are very well educated. It's going to be very, very difficult to roll those activities that these women have done over the last 10 days back. Even today, Hallie, walking around the streets in Tehran, you see women walking around without a headscarf. This was unthinkable 10 days ago, but they're standing by their rights, and it really is quite inspiring to watch.
And the images are absolutely extraordinary that are coming out of Iran. You also have this new attack, this drone attack on the Kurdistan region of Iraq, which people might be going, well, wait a second. Mahsa Amini was Kurdish. Is there any indication that those things are connected, Ali, or do we just not know?
Absolutely. I mean, let me put some context in here for you first. The Kurds in Iran have had a long-standing dispute with the Islamic Republic government. They've never gotten on with each other. As you mentioned, Mahsa Amini was from the Kurdish region of Iran. They exploded there when she died, and then over the weekend, the IRGC launched artillery attacks on Kurdish military bases. They did it again today, and they blamed the Kurdish dissidents of involvement in the ongoing unrest in the country, so it was directly linked to one another.
Ali Arouzi, live for us, continuing some imperative reporting on the ground in Tehran. Ali, thank you. Coming up, an NBC News exclusive you will only see here. The head of the DEA sounding the alarm on a new form of fentanyl. Do you see it here? That's not candy on your screen. That's drugs. What parents should know, what everybody should know. Coming up. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. From our Southeast Bureau, an update on a story we told you about earlier this month. A second middle schooler has died after their boat capsized during what seemed to be a lightning strike in Orlando. Officials say the students were in a competitive rowing club. They were practicing on a lake when the lightning strike happened. The club has said it's cooperating with officials and U.S. Rowing with investigations into what went wrong. NBC has reached out to the club for comment. We'll keep you posted. From our Northeast Bureau, check out this video on social media over the weekend. Philly police say it's a group of about 100 people, mostly kids, ransacking basically a Wawa. I'm sure you know that that is a convenience store that is very Pennsylvania-based. Apparently, they caused like thousands of dollars worth of damage. Nobody got hurt, but Wawa says it's working with police to prevent something like that from happening again. Also from our Northeast Bureau, rapper Post Malone postponed his Boston concert this weekend after being hospitalized again. He says he woke up to cracking sounds on his right side. He's been having trouble breathing. The announcement comes about a week after he fell on stage at a concert in St. Louis. His next show is in Cleveland tomorrow. It's still not clear whether he's going to be there or not. Tonight, a brand new spotlight on what the DEA is calling the country's deadliest drug because of what folks are calling rainbow fentanyl. You probably know fentanyl. Do you know rainbow fentanyl? Take a look at your screen here. They're really colorful. It kind of looks like candy, right? It is definitely not candy. Kind of looks like sidewalk chalk in that picture. It is definitely not chalk. The head of the DEA says this is an extremely powerful drug that is killing people. It is killing people. The pills are getting a lot of attention because in New York, you just saw Senator Chuck Schumer calling on Congress to approve nearly $300 million to get this off the streets. And in California, the state's public health department put out a statewide alert telling schools to watch out because these pills could basically entice little kids. I want to bring in Kate Snow. And Kate, this is a big thing, I think, that has emerged here, the emergence of rainbow fentanyl, a small part of the bigger crisis. And I know you've spoken now exclusively with the head of the DEA. Tell us more about what we should know.
Yeah, it's a big conversation, I would say. The DEA actually warned about this about 4 weeks ago on paper, Hallie, but this is the first time the administrator has spoken out in this exclusive interview that I did today, this morning, actually. I was in D.C. What they're talking about is a type of fentanyl that is colorfully, you're seeing it right there, it does look like chalk. It's colored in rainbow colors, and they're referring to it as rainbow fentanyl. But don't be fooled. It's not any different than all the other fentanyl out there in that it can kill you. It can really kill you. They in these pills that contain fentanyl, Hallie, whether they're colorful or not, about 45% of pills, fake pills that have fentanyl in them, 45% will kill you. Just think about that for a second.
Yeah.
Okay, so rainbow is just the newest way that the cartels, according to the administrator, are trying to reach younger and younger audiences because they think putting them out in rainbow bright colors does make them sort of look like candy. And some of the dealers are saying they're calling them candy names, and they're not candy at all. They can be deadly.
And I wonder how much of the strategy here, because when you look, as you well know, Kate, from your years covering the opioid crisis, that overdose deaths have gone up in the last couple of years. They're up 44%.
Yeah.
More than 2/3 of that was driven by fentanyl and other, synthetic opioids. Is part of the strategy here, because as you point out, rainbow fentanyl, it is still fentanyl. So is part of the strategy here to really raise awareness of this so that people know what they're looking at?
Yeah, definitely. The administrator wanted to sit down to sound an alarm again. I sat down with her a year ago, and we talked about how bad things were with fentanyl, Hallie, and now a year later, they're worse. As you said, overdoses are up again. I said something like 70,000 people died last year from synthetic opioids, which is mainly fentanyl. The LA County School District, the LA School District just announced that they're going to put Narcan, the overdose reversal drug, in schools for K through 12 students. Right. Just think about all that we're in a crisis. And I asked her, what is it about this? What are the dealers doing here? And that whole idea that this is made to look like candy. Take a listen. Some dealers are calling it sweet tarts. They're calling it candy names. It has nothing to do with candy, right?
It has nothing to do with candy. And we should say this as clearly as we possibly can. Many people who are dying from fentanyl poisoning have no idea that they're taking fentanyl. So if someone is handing you a pill, whether it's pink or blue or yellow, that pill should not be taken, ever.
They've found this colorful fentanyl, Hallie, in 21 different states now. They're worried that it'll spread even further, Hallie.
I wonder about the politics of some of this, because Republican National Committee Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel sort of alluded to this being a border issue, saying too many drugs are coming across the border. She talked about this and said every mom in the country is worried that their kids are going to get a hold of rainbow fentanyl. How do we help strike the balance here, right? I wonder if this came up at all, of like sounding the alarm appropriately, and keeping it sort of in the bounds of like an issue that is affecting, real families around the country.
Yeah. Kids are not going to get this in their Halloween baskets. I know that's been floating around on TikTok. You have to seek out these pills, whether it's from a dealer or from a friend. But I will say that I think there's bipartisan outrage here, Hallie. I think that on both sides of the aisle, you heard Chuck Schumer. I've heard plenty of Republicans saying this has to stop. This is universal. These are our children.
Yeah, it's one of those things that cuts across sort of the political whatever here in D.C. Kate Snow, it's a great exclusive. Thank you so much. We're looking forward to watching more of it tonight on NBC Nightly News, of course, with Lester Holt. You know that's at 6:30 Eastern, wherever you watch NBC. Still to come, our backstory. And tonight, we're catching up with Vaughn Hilliard, who just talked with somebody whose entire life has been changed by QAnon conspiracies. We go behind the scenes on how he got this story. Coming up. Time now to get the backstory, our behind-the-scenes look at how a story comes together and how it fits into our bigger picture. And tonight, we're taking a look at the impact that former President Trump's embrace of the QAnon conspiracy theory is having on real lives. You know about QAnon, I think, right? This absolutely bonkers conspiracy theory that says that there's a group of Satan-worshiping, child-eating pedophiles who secretly run the country. People who believe in this think that former President Trump is going to fight some secret battle and get help for the military to reclaim power. And obviously none of this is true. It's completely out there. It's a bizarro conspiracy theory. Well, our Vaughn Hilliard, you see him there. He met somebody who saw how violent just this belief can get. 21-year-old Rebecca Lannis told Vaughn her dad was so isolated while working from home during the pandemic that he got obsessed with QAnon. She says it made him paranoid and a totally different person.
He got a gun and tried to kill everyone in my family, and he would have tried to kill me too if I was there.
Rebecca lost her mom, killed by her father, who also killed her dog and shot her sister. He himself was then killed in a standoff with police. They're still investigating whether there was a specific motive behind the attack. Vaughn Hilliard is joining us now. And Vaughn, this is difficult and dark, right? And you spoke with Rebecca. You sat down with her. She's been through some of the most horrific things that a person can go through, and then is talking about it for the very first time in like a network TV interview. How do you approach that, talking with somebody who's been through something like this when it is still so relatively fresh?
Right, and this happened just 2 weeks ago, Hallie. This is tough. I mean, for anybody that goes through tragedy to be vulnerable and to be willing to talk, let alone somebody whose father just murdered her mother and shot her sister. Along with my producer colleague, PJ Tobia, we went to Michigan, and she agreed to sit down with us. She's one of those few people that was willing to open up her story here, because QAnon, for so many people, they have a hard time when it comes to their family members or their friends about going public, about sort of the isolation and paranoia and the dark rabbit holes that they go into, because we're so frequently told, and Rebecca said this herself, that she hoped after a couple years that her dad would snap out of it. He never did, and that is kind of the hard part of a cult, is to get folks to come back from the brink, and that's where we appreciated Rebecca, and we just allowed her to share her story. And at the very end of the interview, essentially, it's what do you want people to know? She goes that people need to denounce this so that others don't go through the tragedy that she did.
Part of what else is involved in your reporting on this has been talking with people who are QAnon believers, right? Because it doesn't just exist online. You're going out, and I know you're interviewing people who say that they do think that satanic, pedophile cannibals are like running the country. How do you handle that in your line of questioning? Like, how much do you push back or fact check, or how does that work for you?
Right. I think if it was a politician, it'd be different. And I think we need to, Hallie, right, between you and me and others, have some more frank conversations with Republican leaders here, because there is a following of thousands, if not millions, of individuals that believe these. The two individuals you're looking at right now, the very first two people we talked to at the Trump rally in North Carolina on Friday night were both full-blown QAnon believers that believed that there were going to be mass arrests and then the execution of government officials. They believe that, and they said it on camera here. And in so many ways, don't necessarily with, normal mainstream Americans, right, push back on them, because I want to understand just what do they believe, just to get a sense of just how spread out is this, how much has it bled into the American, philosophy, because I think we're dealing with a movement now that is not, we can't call it fringe anymore, Hallie. The former president of the United States has now overtly embraced it over the last month, and it's important to understand, why do people believe these grand conspiracy theories, and now to what extent are they being legitimized because Donald Trump is now out there signaling to them that it's okay to be a QAnon believer.
Vaughn Hilliard, thanks for doing the reporting there out for us on the front lines of this. Appreciate it. That does it for us this hour. We're going to have more for you here tomorrow, same time, same place. Coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.